Chapter 6. Of Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fame and Fortune, or The Progress of Richard Hunter, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 6. Mr. Gilbert is Astonished. When Dick woke up in the morning, the first thing he thought of was his watch. The next, the check which he had received from Mr. Rockwell. "I'll go to the bank this morning and get my money," said he. "How are you going to invest it, Dick?" asked Fosdick. "I don't know," said Dick. "I'll put it in the savings bank till I decide. That'll make more'n $1,100. I didn't used to think I'd ever be worth that, when I slept in boxes and old wagons. $1,100 at 6% interest will yield you $66 a year." "So it will," said Dick, "and all without working. I tell you what, Fosdick, at this rate I'll soon be a man of fortune." "Yes, if you can make $1,000 a day." "I wonder what old Gilbert'll say when he sees it," said Dick. "Who's he?" "He's the bookkeeper. He ain't very fond of me." "What has he against you?" "He thinks I don't treat him with proper respect," said Dick. "Besides, he tried to get his cousin Roswell Crawford in, but he couldn't." "Then it seems both of us have interfered with Roswell." "He's got a place now. I guess he's the senior partner by the way he talks." The breakfast bell rang, and the boys went down to breakfast. Clifton was down already, and was standing in front of the stove. Being an observing young man, he at once noticed Dick's watch chain. "Hulloa, Hunter," said he. "I didn't know you had a watch." "I didn't know it myself till last night," said Dick. "Where did you get it?" "It came from Ball and Black's," said our hero, willing to mystify him. "That's a nice chain. Solid gold, eh?" "Do you think I'd wear anything else?" asked Dick loftily. "Will you allow me to look at the watch?" "Certainly," said Dick, drawing it from his pocket and submitting it to Clifton's inspection. "It's a regular beauty," said the young man enthusiastically. "Do you mind telling how much you paid for it?" "How much do you think?" $100. "It cost all of that," said Dick confidently. "If you see one for sale at that price, just let me know, and I'll buy it for a speculation." "You must be getting a pretty good salary to buy such a watch as that." "Pretty good," said Dick carelessly. Mr. Clifton was a rather shallow young man, who was fond of show, and had a great respect for those who were able to make it. When Dick first came to the boarding-house, he looked down upon him as a boy; but now that he proved to be the possessor of an elegant gold watch and chain, and might, therefore, be regarded as in prosperous circumstances, he conceived a high respect for him. The truth was that Clifton himself only got $2 a week more than Dick, yet he paid $8 a week for board, and spent the rest in dress. His reputation among tailors was not the best, being always more ready to order new clothes than to pay for them. While they were talking, the rest of the boarders entered, and breakfast commenced. Miss Peyton was there, of course. "How did you find your friends in Madison Avenue last evening, Mr. Hunter?" she inquired. "They were all up and dressed," said Dick. "They sent their particular regards to you." "Oh, you wicked story-teller!" simpered Miss Peyton. "Just as if I'd believe such nonsense. Have they got a nice house?" "Beautiful," said Dick. "I haven't seen any like it since I called on Queen Victoria last year." "How is the house furnished?" "Well," said Dick, "as near as I can remember, there's diamonds worked in the carpet, and all the tables and chairs is of gold. They'd be rather hard to sit on if it twa'n't for the velvet cushions." "Ain't you afraid to tell such stories, Mr. Hunter? Mr. Fosdick, you'll have to talk to your friend." "I'm afraid it wouldn't do much good, Miss Peyton, if you fail to cure him." "Mr. Hunter has just been investing in a handsome watch," remarked Clifton, passing his cup for a second cup of coffee. "Oh, do let me look at it. I dote on watches," said Miss Peyton. "Certainly," said Dick, and he detached the chain from his buttonhole and passed the watch across the table. "It's a perfect little love," said Miss Peyton enthusiastically. isn't it, Mrs. Browning?" "It's very beautiful, certainly," said the landlady. She could not help feeling surprised that Dick, who, it will be remembered, had represented himself at his first visit to be in limited circumstances, and now occupied one of her cheapest rooms, could afford to purchase an article which was evidently so costly. "Where did you buy it, Mr. Hunter?" asked another boarder. "I did not buy it at all," said Dick, deciding to let it be known how it came into his possession. "It was given to me." "Perhaps you'll mention my name to the person that gave it to you," said Mr. Clifton. "If he's got any more to dispose of in that way, I should like to come in for one." "How do you know but it may have come from a lady friend, Mr. Clifton?" said Miss Peyton slyly. "How is that, Hunter?" "I haven't had any presents from any of my lady friends yet," said Dick. "Perhaps I may sometime." "You don't mean any one in particular, of course, Mr. Hunter?" said Miss Peyton. "Oh, no, of course not." This conversation may seem scarcely worth recording, but it will serve to illustrate the character of Dick's fellow boarders. Miss Peyton was rather silly and affected, but she was good-natured, and Dick felt more at home with her than he would have done had she been a lady like Mrs. Rockwell, for instance. It got to be the custom with Dick and Fosdick to remain in the parlor a short time after supper, or rather dinner, for this was the third meal, and Fosdick joined the young lady in singing. Dick, unfortunately, had not been gifted by nature with a voice attuned to melody, and he participated only as a listener, in which capacity he enjoyed the entertainment. After breakfast, Dick set out for the store as usual. He felt unusually happy and independent as he walked along. The check in his pocket made him feel rich. He wondered how it would be best to invest his money, so as to yield him the largest return. He wisely decided to take Mr. Murdock, the head clerk, into his confidence, and ask his advice upon the point. When Dick arrived at the store, neither Mr. Gilbert nor Mr. Murdock had yet arrived. Half an hour later the latter came, and 5 minutes after him the bookkeeper. The latter noticed that the morning paper appeared to have been disturbed, and glad of any opportunity to find fault with Dick, said angrily, "So you've been reading the paper instead of minding your work, have you? I'll report you to Mr. Rockwell." "Thank you," said Dick. "You're very kind. Are you sure I read the paper? Is there any news missing out of it?" "You're an impudent boy," said the bookkeeper, provoked. He wanted to overawe Dick, but somehow Dick wouldn't be overawed. Evidently he did not entertain as much respect for the bookkeeper as that gentleman felt to be his due. That a mere errand boy should bandy words with a gentleman in his position seemed to Mr. Gilbert highly reprehensible. "You're an impudent boy," repeated Gilbert sharply, finding Dick did not reply to his first charge. "I heard you make that remark before," said Dick quietly. Now there was nothing out of the way in Dick's tone, which was perfectly respectful, and he only stated a fact. But the bookkeeper became still more angry. "Who rumpled that paper?" he asked. "Suppose you ask Mr. Murdock?" said Dick. "Did he come in here?" asked Gilbert, cooling down, for it was against Dick that his charge was made, and not against the head clerk. As to the paper, he really cared nothing. "Yes," said Dick. "Then it's all right. I supposed you had been idling your time over the paper. Go and ask Mr. Murdock what time it is. I left my watch at home." "It's 8:30, said Dick, drawing out his watch. Up to this time the bookkeeper had not noticed Dick's watch chain. Now that his attention was drawn not only to that, but to the beautiful gold watch which Dick carried, he was not a little surprised. "Whose watch is that?" he asked abruptly. "Mine," said Dick, briefly, rather enjoying the bookkeeper's surprise. "How did you come by it?" "Honestly," said Dick. "Is it gold or only plated?" "It's gold." Did you buy it, or was it given you?" "Well," said Dick, "I didn't buy it." "Did you say it was yours?" "Yes." Gilbert looked at Dick in surprise. Our hero was becoming more and more an enigma to him. That a boy in Dick's position should have a gold watch given him, especially now that he had learned from his cousin Roswell the nature of Dick's former employment, seemed indeed wonderful. "Let me look at your watch a minute," he said. Dick handed it to him. "It seems to be a very good one," he said. "Yes," said Dick. "I ain't proud. It's as good as I want to wear." "It looks entirely out of place on such a boy as you," said the bookkeeper sharply. "Perhaps it would look better on you," suggested our hero innocently. "Yes, it would be more appropriate for me to wear than you. You're not old enough to be entrusted with a watch, least of all with such a good one as that." "Perhaps you'd be kind enough to mention it to the one who gave it to me." "Whoever gave it to you didn't show much judgment," said Gilbert in the same pleasant way. "Who was it?" "It was Mrs. Rockwell." If a bombshell had exploded in the office, it could hardly have taken Gilbert more by surprise. "Who did you say?" he repeated, thinking his ears might have deceived him. "Mrs. Rockwell," said Dick once more. The bookkeeper could hardly suppress a low whistle. "When did she give it to you?" "Last evening." "Were you up there?" "Yes." "Did Mr. Rockwell invite you?" "Yes." Just then Dick was called away by Mr. Murdock, who had some work for him to do. "There's something mighty queer in all this," thought the bookkeeper. "What Mr. Rockwell can see in that boy I don't understand. He's an impudent young rascal, and I'll get him turned off if it's a possible thing." End of chapter 6. Of Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fame and Fortune, or The Progress of Richard Hunter, by Horatio Alger, Jr., Chapter 7. A Financial Discussion. In the course of the morning, Dick called at Park Bank, and presented the check which was made payable to himself. His employer had accompanied him to the bank on a previous day, and introduced him to the cashier as one who was authorized to receive and pay over money for the firm. Dick therefore found no difficulty in obtaining his money, though the fact that the check was made payable to him created some surprise. "Your salary seems to be a large one," said the teller, as he handed our hero 10 bills of $100 each. "Yes," said Dick, "my services are very valuable." On leaving the bank, Dick went to the savings bank and presented his book. "How much do you wish to deposit?" $1,000, said Dick briefly. The bank officer looked at him in surprise. "How much did you say?" he repeated. $1,000. "No nonsense, young man. My time is too valuable," said the other, impatiently. He was justified in his incredulity, since Dick's deposits hitherto had been in sums of from $1 to $5. "If you don't want to take my money, I can go somewhere else," said our hero, who was now on his dignity. "I have $1,000 to deposit. Here it is." The bank officer took the money, and counted it over in considerable surprise. "Business is improving, isn't it?" he said. "Yes," said Dick. "I made all that money in one day." "If you should want a partner, call round and see me." "All right. I won't forget." Dick took the bank book, and putting it in his inside coat pocket, buttoned up his coat, and hurried back to the store. His reflections were of a very agreeable nature, as he thought of his large deposit in the savings bank, and he could not help feeling that he had been born under a lucky star. Nothing of consequence transpired in the store that day. Dick was attentive to his duties. He was determined to learn the business as rapidly as possible, not only because he felt grateful to Mr. Rockwell for his kindness, but also because he knew that this was the best thing for his future prospects. Mr. Murdock, who has already been mentioned, was of service to him in this respect. He was himself an excellent business man, and very conscientious in the discharge of his duties. He required the same fidelity of others. He had observed Dick closely, and was attracted towards him by his evident desire to give satisfaction, as well as by his frank, open face. He resolved to help him along, more especially when he saw the manner in which he was being treated by the bookkeeper. To tell the truth, Mr. Gilbert was not a favorite with Mr. Murdock. He understood his business, to be sure, and so far as Mr. Murdock knew, kept the books correctly. But personally he was not agreeable, and the head salesman doubted whether his integrity was what it should have been. So, altogether, he made up his mind to help Dick on as well as he could, and take pains to instruct him in the business. Dick, on his side, was pleased with Mr. Murdock, and determined to make him a confidant in the matter of his sudden accession of fortune. He took an opportunity, therefore, during the day, to say to him, "Mr. Murdock, I want to ask your advice about something." "Well, lad, what is it?" said his friend kindly. "If it's about choosing a wife, I don't know whether my advice will be good for much." "It isn't that," said Dick. "Next year will be soon enough for that." "So I should think. Well, if it's nothing of that sort, what is it?" "It's about investing some money. I thought you might be able to advise me." "How much is it?" asked Mr. Murdock, supposing the sum could not be more than $50 or $60. $1,100, said Dick. "How much?" demanded the salesman in surprise. $1,100. "Is it your own?" "Yes." "Of course you couldn't have earned so much. Was it left to you?" "I'll tell you all about it," said Dick. "I wouldn't tell Mr. Gilbert, and I don't mean he shall know it, but I'd just as lieves tell you. Do you know why Mr. Rockwell gave me this place?" "No. I've wondered a little, not at that, but at his giving you so much higher pay than boys usually receive." "Then I'll tell you." Dick proceeded to give an account of the manner in which he had rescued little Johnny from drowning, as related in the adventures of Ragged Dick. "It was a brave act," said Mr. Murdock. "It was nothing at all," said Dick, modestly. "I could swim like a duck, and I didn't mind the wetting." "But you ran the risk of drowning." "I didn't think of that." "If you had been a coward, or a selfish boy, it would have been the first thing you would have thought of. So Mr. Rockwell gave you this place in acknowledgment of your service. I am glad he did. You deserve it." "He has done more," said Dick. Then he related the events of the previous evening, and told Mr. Murdock of the 2 gifts he had received. "So with the money I had before, I have now $1,100, Dick concluded. "Shall I leave it in the savings bank, or can I do better with it?" "I'll tell you what I think will be a good investment," said Mr. Murdock. "I know a party who owns 4 adjoining lots on 45th Street. He is pressed for money, and wishes to dispose of them. He offered them to me at $2,200, half cash. I offered him $1,000 cash for 2 of them, but he wishes to sell the whole together. I think it will be an excellent speculation, for the laying out of Central Park is carrying up the price of lots in the neighborhood rapidly." "Why didn't you buy them, then?" "Because I didn't want to buy anything that I couldn't pay for at once. I've got a wife and 3 children to look out for, and so I can save money, but slowly. If I only had myself to take care of, I wouldn't hesitate." "Can't we club together and buy it?" suggested Dick, eagerly. "That is just what I was going to propose. I think the owner will take $2,000 down for the lots. That will be $1,000 apiece. I've got that money, and so have you. What do you think of it?" "Tip-top," said Dick, enthusiastically. "It's just what I'd like to do." "Of course, it wouldn't bring us in anything, but would instead be an expense for the present, as we should have to pay taxes on it. On the other hand, you could invest the money in bank stock so as to receive $70 or $80 annually at interest. You must decide which investment you prefer. The land we may have to keep on hand 4 or 5 years, paying taxes yearly. But the price will go up. There's no doubt of that. The city is extending northwards rapidly. I shouldn't be surprised if the lots would bring $1,000 apiece in less than 5 years. That would be equal to a very handsome interest." "I'm in for buying 'em," said Dick. "So if you'll see the owner, I'll have the money all ready whenever you want." "Very well, but perhaps you would look to see them first. We'll manage to get off an hour earlier than usual this afternoon, and go up and take a look at them." "It seems to me Mr. Murdock and that boy are pretty thick together," said the bookkeeper, glancing through the glass partition. He could see that they were conversing earnestly, but of course couldn't hear a word that was said.
What he or Mr. Rockwell can see in that young rascal passes my comprehension.
He called sharply to Dick and ordered him to go to the post office for letters.
"All right," said Dick. "And mind you don't loiter by the way," said the bookkeeper sharply. "You were gone long enough at the bank this morning. Did you come right back?"
"No," said Dick.
"Why didn't you?"
"There was somewhere else I wanted to go."
"On your business or Mr. Rockwell's?"
"On my own business."
"So I thought. I shall report you to Mr. Rockwell," said Gilbert triumphantly.
"I wouldn't if I were you," said Dick coolly.
"And why not, you young rascal?"
"Because he knows it already."
"Knows it already?"
repeated the bookkeeper, discomfited.
"Well, I hope he gave you a good scolding."
"Sorry to disappoint you," said Dick, "but he knows it because he gave me leave to go."
"I don't believe it," said Gilbert,
mortified to find that Dick was in the right after all. "Then perhaps you'd better ask Mr. Rockwell."
"I will,"
said Gilbert, who really had no intention of doing so.
"You must have had some very urgent private business," he added with a sneer.
"You're right there," said Dick.
"Playing marbles with some of your ragamuffin friends, I suppose."
"Playing marbles is a very refined and intellectual amusement," said Dick, "but I don't play marbles in business hours."
"Where did you go?"
said the bookkeeper impatiently.
"I don't want any of your impertinence."
"I went to the savings bank," said Dick.
"I suppose you have a very large account there," sneered Gilbert.
"Yes," said Dick quietly, "pretty large."
"It's to be hoped you won't withdraw your patronage, or the bank might fail."
"Then I won't," said Dick. "Shall I go to the post office now?"
"Yes, and be quick about it."
The bookkeeper had some curiosity as to the amount of Dick's account at the savings bank, but there was no good chance for him to inquire, and he accordingly returned to his writing, more prejudiced against Dick than ever. On the whole, I have some doubts whether Dick's manner was quite as respectful as it ought to have been to one who was older and higher in office than himself. I should not recommend my young readers to imitate him in this respect, but it is my business to describe Dick just as he was, and I have already said that he was not a model boy. Still, in most respects he tried to do what was right, and it must be admitted that the bookkeeper's treatment of him was not likely to inspire much attachment or respect. Dick had no difficulty in perceiving the dislike entertained by Gilbert for him, and he was beginning to cherish a similar feeling towards the bookkeeper. He determined, however, to give him no cause of complaint, so far as he was entitled to command his services. But it must be confessed he found much more satisfaction in obeying Mr. Rockwell and Mr. Murdock. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. Of Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fame and Fortune, or The Progress of Richard Hunter, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 8. New Plans. At the close of the afternoon, as had been proposed, Mr. Murdock, accompanied by Dick, rode up as far as 45th Street, to look at the lots which he had suggested buying. They were located in a very eligible situation, between 5th and 6th Avenues. Some of my young readers may not be aware that the dimensions of a city lot are 20 feet front by 100 feet in depth. The 4 lots together made a plot of 100 feet by 100, or a little less than a quarter of an acre. In the country, the whole would scarcely have been considered sufficient for a house, with a good yard in front. But if people choose to live in the city, they must make up their minds to be crowded. "It looks small, don't it?" said Dick. "I shouldn't think there were 4 lots there." "Yes," said Mr. Murdock. "They are of the regular size. Some lots are only 20 feet wide. These are 25. They don't look so large before they are built on." "Well, said Dick. "I'm in for buying them." "I think it will be a good investment for both of us," said Mr. Murdock. "The money shall be ready whenever you want it," said Dick. "Very well. I will see the owner tomorrow, or rather this evening, as it is best to be prompt, lest we might lose so favorable a bargain. I will make the best terms I can with him, and let you know the results tomorrow." "All right," said Dick. "Good night, Mr. Murdock." "Good night. By the by, won't you come round and take supper with us? My wife and children will be glad to make your acquaintance." "Thank you," said Dick. "I will come some other evening with pleasure. But if I stay away without saying anything about it, Fosdick won't know what's become of me." Dick got back to Bleecker Street a little late for dinner. When he entered the dining room, the remainder of the boarders were seated at the table. "Come, Mr. Hunter, you must render an account of yourself," said Miss Peyton playfully. "Why are you so late this evening?" "Suppose I don't tell," said Dick. "Then you must pay a fine, mustn't he, Mrs. Browning?" "That depends upon who is to benefit by the fines," said the landlady. "If they are to be paid to me, I shall be decidedly in favor of it. That reminds me that you were late to breakfast this morning, Miss Peyton." "Oh, ladies mustn't be expected to pay fines," said Miss Peyton, shaking her ringlets. "They never have any money, you know." "Then I think we must let Mr. Hunter off," said Mrs. Browning. "If he will tell us what has detained him. You must excuse my curiosity, Mr. Hunter, but ladies, you know, are privileged to be curious." "I don't mind telling," said Dick, helping himself to a piece of toast. "I'm talking of buying some lots uptown, and went up with a friend to look at them." Fosdick looked at Dick inquiringly, not knowing if he were in earnest or not. "Indeed," said Mr. Clifton. "May I inquire where the lots are situated?" "I'll tell you if I buy 'em," said Dick, "but I don't want to run the risk of losing them." "You needn't be afraid of my cutting you out," said Clifton. "I paid my washerwoman this morning, and haven't got but $1.50 over. I suppose that won't buy the property." "I wish it would," said Dick. "In that case I'd buy half a dozen lots." "I suppose from your investing in lots, Mr. Hunter, that you are thinking of getting married and living in a house of your own?" said Miss Peyton, simpering. "No," said Dick. "I shan't get married for a year. Nobody ought to be married before they're 17. "That's just my age," said Miss Peyton. Mr. Clifton afterwards informed Dick that Miss Peyton was 25, but did not mention how he had ascertained. He likewise added that when he first came to the boarding-house, she had tried her fascination upon him. "She'd have married me in a minute," he said complacently, "but I'm too old a bird to be caught that way. When you see Mrs. Clifton, gentlemen, you'll see style and beauty and money," he added, after a moment's reflection. Mr. Clifton had a tolerably good opinion of himself, as may be inferred from this remark. In fact, he valued himself rather more highly than the ladies appeared to do. But such cases are not remarkable. "Mrs. Clifton will be a lucky woman," said Dick, with a sober face. "You're very kind to say so," said Mr. Clifton modestly. "I believe I'm tolerably good-looking, and nobody'll deny that I've got style. But money, that's my weak point. You couldn't lend me $5, could you, till next week?" "I'm afraid not," said Dick. "My uptown lots cost so much, and then there will be the taxes afterwards." "Oh, it's of no consequence. I thought a little of going to the opera tonight, and I need a new pair of gloves. It costs a sight to keep a fellow in gloves." "So it does," said Dick. "I bought a pair for 50 cents 6 months ago, and now I've got to buy another pair." "Ha, ha, ha! Good joke. By the way, I wonder you fellows don't take a better room." "Why should we? Isn't this good enough?" asked Fosdick. "Oh, it's comfortable and all that," said Clifton. "But you know what I mean. You wouldn't want any of your fashionable friends to call upon you here." "That's a fact," said Dick. "Suppose he said, turning to Fosdick with a twinkle in his eye. "Johnny Nolan should call upon us here. What would he think of our living in such a room?" "He would probably be surprised," said Fosdick, entering into the joke. "Is he one of your Madison Avenue friends?" asked Clifton, a little mystified. "I don't know where he lives," said Dick, with truth, "but he's a friend of mine, in business downtown." "Wholesale or retail?" "Retail, I should say. Shouldn't you, Fosdick?" "Yes," said Fosdick, amused at Clifton's evident mystification. "Well, good evening, gents," said Clifton, sauntering out of the room. "Call and see when you haven't anything better to do." "Thank you. Good night." "Were you in earnest, Dick, about the uptown lots?" asked Fosdick, after Clifton had left the room. "Yes," said Dick. "It's an investment that Mr. Murdock advised. I'll tell you about it, and then you can tell me what you think of it." Dick thereupon gave an account of the conversation that had taken place between him and the head clerk, and what they proposed to do. "What do you think of it?" he concluded. "I have no doubt it is an excellent plan," said Fosdick. "But of course my opinion isn't worth much. I don't see but you stand a chance to be a rich man some time, Dick." "By the time I get to be 100, said Dick. "A good while before that, I presume. But there's something else we must not forget." "What is that?" "Money is a good thing to have, but a good education is better. I was thinking to-day that since we have come here we haven't done any studying to amount to anything." "That is true." "And the sooner we begin, the better." "All right, I agree to that. But we shall need assistance. I've taught you about all I know myself, and now we want to go higher. What shall we do? I'll tell you, Dick. Have you noticed the young man that has a room just opposite ours? His name is Layton, isn't it?" "Yes." "What about him?" "I heard yesterday that he was a teacher in a private school. We might engage him to teach us in the evening, or at any rate see if he's willing." "All right. Is he in now, I wonder?" "Yes. I heard him go into his room a few minutes since." "Very well. Suppose we go in and speak to him." The boys at once acted upon this suggestion, and crossing the entry, knocked at the door. "Come in," said a voice from within. The door being opened, they found themselves in the presence of a young man of pleasant appearance, apparently about 25 years of age. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said. "I am glad to see you. Will you have seats?" "Thank you," said Fosdick. "We came in on a little business. I understand you are a teacher, Mr. Layton?" "Yes. I am engaged in a private school in the city." "My friend and myself are engaged in business during the day, but we feel that our education is quite deficient, and we want to make arrangements to study evenings. We cannot do this to advantage without assistance. Are you occupied during the evenings?" "No, I am not." "Perhaps you would not like teaching in the evening, after being engaged in the daytime." "On the contrary, I have been hoping to secure scholars, but I hardly knew how to set about it." "Are you acquainted with the French language, Mr. Layton?" "Yes, I am tolerably familiar with it. I studied it at college with a native teacher." "If you are a college graduate, then, you will be able to teach us whatever we desire to learn. But I am afraid we may not be able to make it worth your while. We have neither of us large salaries. But if $4 a week, $2 for each of us, would be satisfactory—" "I shall be satisfied with it," said Mr. Layton. "In fact," he added frankly, "I shall consider it a welcome addition to my salary. My father died a year since, and my mother and sister are compelled to depend upon me in part for their support. But I have not been able to do as much for them as I wished. This addition to my earnings will give me the means of increasing their comforts." "Then it will be a pleasant arrangement all around," said Fosdick. "What would you advise us to study?" After a few inquiries as to their present attainments, Mr. Layton recommended a course of mathematics, beginning with algebra, history, and the French language. He gave the boys a list of the books they would be likely to need. The next evening the boys commenced studying, and determined to devote an hour and a half each evening to mental improvement. They found Mr. Layton an excellent teacher, and he on his side found them very apt pupils. Dick had an active, intelligent mind, and an excellent capacity, and Fosdick had always had a thirst for learning, which he was now able to gratify. As his salary would have been insufficient to pay his expenses, and the teacher besides, he was obliged to have recourse to his little fund in the savings bank. Dick offered to assist him, but Fosdick would not consent. Just as his savings were about exhausted, his wages were raised $2 a week, and this enabled him to continue the arrangement without assistance. In the course of a few weeks, the boys commenced reading French, and found it quite interesting. End of Chapter 8. Of Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fame and Fortune, or the Progress of Richard Hunter, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 9. Roswell Crawford at Home. While Fosdick and Dick are devoting their evenings to study, under the guidance of Mr. Layton, we will direct the reader's attention to a young gentleman who considered himself infinitely superior in the social scale to either. Roswell Crawford could never forget that Dick had once been a bootblack, and looked upon it as an outrage that such a boy should be earning a salary of $10 a week, while he, a gentleman's son, was only paid $4, which he regarded as a beggarly pittance. Roswell's father had once kept a small dry goods store on Broadway. This constituted his claim to gentility. After his failure, Mr. Crawford tried several kinds of business, without succeeding in any. His habits were not strictly temperate, and he had died 2 years previous. His wife hired a house in Clinton Place, and took boarders, barely succeeding in making both ends meet at the end of the year. The truth was that she was not a good manager, and preferred to talk of her gentility and former wealth to looking after the affairs of the household. She was very much like her son in this respect. Among Mrs. Crawford's boarders was Mr. Gilbert, who is already known to the reader as the bookkeeper of Rockwell and Cooper. It has been mentioned also that he was Roswell's cousin, being a son of Mrs. Crawford's only brother. He, too, was not unlike his aunt and cousin, and all three combined to hate and despise Dick, whom Mrs. Crawford saw fit to regard as her son's successful rival. "How's the boot-black, Cousin James?" asked Roswell, on the evening succeeding that which Dick had passed at Mr. Rockwell's. "Putting on airs worse than ever," replied Gilbert. "Mr. Rockwell has a singular taste, to say the least," said Mrs. Crawford, "or he wouldn't hire a boy from the streets, and give him such extravagant wages. To pay such a vagabond $10 a week, when a boy of good family, like Roswell, can get but $4, is perfectly ridiculous." "I don't believe he gets so much," said Roswell. "It's only one of his big stories." "You're mistaken there," said Gilbert. "He does get exactly that. Are you sure of it?" "I ought to be, since I received directions from Mr. Roswell to-day to pay him that amount to-morrow night, that being the end of the week." "I never heard of such a thing!" ejaculated Mrs. Crawford. "The man must be a simpleton." "If he is, there's another besides him." "Who do you mean?" "Mrs. Rockwell." "Has she made acquaintance with the bootblack, then?" asked Roswell with a sneer. "Yes, he visited them last evening at their house." "Did he tell you so?" "Yes." "I should think they'd feel honored by such a visitor." "Probably they did, for Mrs. Rockwell made him a present of a gold watch." "What?" exclaimed Roswell and his mother in concert. "It's true. I sent him out to ask the time to-day, when he pulled out a new gold watch, with an air of importance, and told me the time."
Was it a good watch? A very handsome one. It must have cost, with the chain, $125. The idea of a bootblack with a gold watch! Exclaimed Roswell with a sneer. It's about as appropriate as a pig in a silk dress. I can't understand it at all, said Mrs. Crawford. It can't be that he's a poor relation of theirs, can it? I should say not. Mr. Rockwell wouldn't be likely to have a relation reduced to blacking boots. Is the boy so attractive, then? What does he look like? He's as bold as brass, and hasn't got any manners nor education, said Roswell. Poor Dick! His ears ought to have tingled, considering the complimentary things that were said of him this evening. But luckily he knew nothing of it, and if he had, it is doubtful whether it would have troubled him much. He was independent in his ideas, and didn't trouble himself much about the opinion of others, as long as he felt that he was doing right, as nearly as he knew how. "Do you think this strange fancy of Mr. Rockwell's is going to last?" inquired Mrs. Crawford. "I wish Roswell could have got in there." "So do I, but I couldn't accomplish it." "If this boy should fall out of favor, there might be a chance for Roswell yet. Don't you think so?" asked Mrs. Crawford. "I wish there might," said Roswell. "I'd like to see that beggar's pride humbled. Besides, $4 a week is such a miserable salary." "You thought yourself lucky when you got it." "So I did, but that was before I found out how much this bootblack was getting." "Well," said Gilbert, "he isn't a favorite of mine, as you know well enough. If there's anything I can do to oust him, I shall do it." "Couldn't you leave some money in his way? He might be tempted to steal it." "I don't know yet what course would be best. I'll try to get him into trouble of some kind, but I can tell better by and by what to do." Gilbert went up to his room, and Mrs. Crawford and Roswell were left alone. "I wish you were at Rockwell and Cooper's, Roswell," said his mother. "So do I, mother, but it's no use wishing." "I don't know about that. Your cousin ought to have some influence there." "The bootblack's in the way." "He may not be in the way always. Your cousin may detect in him something that will cause his discharge." "Even if he does, I've tried once to get in there, and didn't succeed. They didn't seem to take a fancy to me." "I shouldn't expect them to, if they take a fancy to a common street boy. But when they find him out, they may change their opinion of you." "I don't know how that will be, mother. At any rate, I think I ought to get more than $4 a week where I am. Why, there's Talbot, only 2 years older than I, gets $8, and I do more than he. To tell the truth, I don't like the place. I don't like to be seen carrying round bundles. It isn't fit work for a gentleman's son." Roswell forgot that many of the most prosperous merchants in the city began in that way, only on less wages. One who wants to climb the ladder of success must, except in very rare cases, commence at the lowest round. This was what Roswell did not like. He wanted to begin halfway up at the very least. It was a great hindrance to him that he regarded himself as a gentleman's son, and was puffed up with a corresponding sense of his own importance. The more Roswell thought of his ill-requited services, as he considered them, the more he felt aggrieved. It may be mentioned that he was employed in a dry goods store on 6th Avenue, and was chiefly engaged in carrying out bundles for customers. A circumstance which occurred about this time deepened his disgust of the place. About the middle of the next week, he was carrying a heavy bundle to a house on Madison Avenue. Now it happened that Mr. Rockwell, who, it will be remembered, lived on the same street, had left home that morning, quite forgetting an important letter which he had received, and which required an early answer. He therefore summoned Dick, and said, "Richard, do you remember the location of my house?" "Yes, sir," said Dick. "I find I have left an important letter at home. I have written a line to my wife, that she may know where to look for it. I want you to go up at once." "Very well, sir."
Dick took the note, and walking to Broadway, jumped on board an omnibus, and in a few minutes found himself opposite the Fifth Avenue Hotel. Here he alighted, and crossing the Park, entered Madison Avenue, then as now lined with fine houses. Walking briskly up the avenue, he overtook a boy of about his own size, with a large bundle under his arm. Glancing at him as he passed, he recognized Roswell Crawford. "How are you, Crawford?" said Dick in an offhand manner. Roswell looked at the speaker, whom he recognized. "I'm well," said he, in a stiff, ungracious manner. Ashamed of the large bundle he was carrying, he would rather have been seen by any boy than Dick, under present circumstances. He did not fail to notice Nick's neat dress, and the gold chain displayed on his vest. Indeed, there was nothing in Dick's appearance which would have been inconsistent with the idea that he lived on the avenue, and was, what Roswell claimed to be, a gentleman's son. It seemed to Roswell that Dick was immensely presumptuous in swaggering up Madison Avenue in such a style, as he mentally called it, and he formed the benevolent design of taking down his pride, and making him feel uncomfortable, if possible. "Have you lost your place?" he inquired. "No," said Dick, "not yet. It's very kind of you to inquire." "I suppose they pay you for walking the streets, then?" he said with a sneer. "Yes," said Dick composedly. "That's one of the things they pay me for." "I suppose you like it better than blacking boots," said Roswell, who, supposing that Dick was ashamed of his former occupation, felt a malicious pleasure in reminding him of it. "Yes," said Dick, "I like it better on the whole. But then there's some advantages about boot blackin'." "Indeed," said Roswell superciliously. "As I was never in the business, I can't of course decide." "Then I was in business for myself, you see, and was my own master. Now I have to work for another man." "You don't seem to be working very hard now," said Roswell, enviously. "Not very," said Dick. "You must be tired carrying that heavy bundle. I'll carry it for you as far as I go." Roswell, who was not above accepting a favor from a boy he didn't like, willingly transferred it to our hero. "I carried it out just to oblige," he said, as if he were not in the daily habit of carrying such packages. "That's very kind of you," said Dick. Roswell did not know whether Dick spoke sarcastically or not, and therefore left the remark unnoticed. "I don't think I shall stay where I am very long," he said. "Don't you like?" asked Dick. "Not very well. I'm not obliged to work for a living," added Roswell, loftily, but not altogether truly. "I am," said Dick. "I've had to work for a living ever since I was 6 years old. I suppose you work because you like it." "I'm learning business. I'm going to be a merchant as my father was." "I'll have to give up the bundle now," said Dick. "This is as far as I am going." Roswell took back his bundle, and Dick went up the steps of Mr. Rockwell's residence and rang the doorbell. End of Chapter 9. Of Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fame and Fortune, or The Progress of Richard Hunter, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 10. A Store on 6th Avenue. Roswell kept on his way with his heavy bundle, more discontented than ever. The bundle seemed heavier than ever. Dick had no such bundles to carry. He had an easier time. His business position was better, and his wages more than double. And all this in spite of the glaring fact that Roswell was a gentleman's son, and Dick wasn't. Surely Fortune was very blind, and unfair in the distribution of her favors. "I suppose he'll be crowing over me," thought Roswell bitterly, judging from what would have been his own feeling had the case been reversed. "I hope he'll have to go back to boot blacking some day. I wish mother'd buy me a gold watch and chain.
There'd be some sense in my wearing it."
Roswell evidently thought it very inappropriate that Dick should wear a handsome gold watch, more especially as he was quite sure beforehand that his mother would not gratify his own desire to possess one. Still, he resolved to ask. There was another thing he meant to ask. Feeling that his services were worth more than the wages he received, and convincing himself that his employers would be unwilling to lose him, he determined to ask an advance of $2 a week, making $6 in all. Not that he considered that even this would pay him, but as he could hardly hope that he would be appreciated according to his deserts, he limited his request to that sum. He concluded to defer making his application until Saturday evening, when he would receive his week's wages. He consulted his mother upon this subject, and she, having nearly as high an opinion of her promising son as he had himself, consented to the application. If his cousin, James Gilbert, had heard of his intention, he was enough of a business man to have dissuaded him from the attempt. Though he saw fit to espouse the cause of Roswell against Dick, it was more because he disliked the latter than because he was blind to the faults of the former. Indeed, he had a very moderate opinion of his young cousin's capabilities. The days slipped by, and Saturday night came. It was 9 o'clock before Roswell was released, the Saturday night trade being the best of the week. The other clerks had been paid, Roswell's turn coming last, because he was the youngest. The designation of the firm was Hall & Turner. Mr. Hall, the senior partner, usually went home early in the evening, and Mr. Turner, the junior partner, a man of about 35, attended to the evening business and paid the weekly wages.
"Here, Crawford,"
he said, counting out 4 $1 bills.
"It's your turn now."
"I want to speak to you for a moment, Mr. Turner," said Roswell, beginning to feel a little nervous, for now that the time had come for making his request, he felt a little uncertain how it would be received.
"Very well,"
said his employer, showing a little surprise.
"Be quick about it, for I want to get through."
"I want to know if you would not be willing to raise my wages," said Roswell, rather awkwardly.
"On what ground do you ask for it?"
said Mr. Turner, looking up.
"I thought I might be worth more,"
said Roswell.
"How long have you been in my employment? Do you remember?"
"About 4 months,"
said Roswell.
"Do you think you have learned enough in that time to make you worth more?"
Yes, sir,"
said Roswell, with a little hesitation.
"How much more would satisfy you?"
$2 more, for the present,"
said Roswell, beginning to feel a little hopeful.
"That is $6 a week."
"Yes, sir."
"And how soon would you expect another advance?"
asked Mr. Turner, quietly.
"In about 6 months."
"You are quite moderate in your demands, certainly." There was something in Mr. Turner's tone which struck Roswell as unfavorable, and he hastily said in his own justification,
"There's a friend of mine, no older than I am, who gets $10 a week."
Certainly Roswell must have spoken inadvertently, or he would hardly have referred to Dick as his friend. But his main idea at present was to produce an impression upon the mind of Mr. Turner.
"Is your friend in a dry goods store?"
asked Mr. Turner.
"No, sir."
"Then I don't see that his wages have any bearing upon your case. There may be some special circumstances that affect his compensation. How long has he been in the service of his present employer?"
"Only a week or 2.
"Is this his first place?"
"Yes, sir."
"It may be that he is some relative of his employer."
"That isn't very likely,"
said Roswell, his lip curling.
"He used to be a bootblack about the streets."
"Indeed," said Mr. Turner, keenly. "I think you said he was a friend of yours."
"No, sir,"
said Roswell, proudly.
I haven't the honor."
"You certainly said, 'There's a friend of mine, no older than I am, who gets $10 a week.'"
"I didn't mean to speak of him as my friend," said Roswell. "I am a gentleman's son."
"If you are, his friendship might do you no harm. If he receives the wages you state, he must be a smart fellow. If he didn't earn as much, probably he would not receive it."
"I don't believe he'll keep his place long," muttered Roswell, his wish being father to the thought.
"If he doesn't, you may be able to succeed him," said Mr. Turner. "I shall be compelled to refuse your request. Indeed, so far from increasing your compensation, I have been considering during the last week whether it would not be my best interest to get another boy in your place."
"Sir!" exclaimed Roswell in dismay.
"I will give you my reasons. You appear to think yourself of too great consequence to discharge properly the duties of your position."
I don't understand you, sir," stammered Roswell.
"I believe you claim to be a gentleman's son."
"Yes, sir," said Roswell. "My father used to keep a store on Broadway."
"And I am led to suppose you think it incompatible with your dignity to carry bundles to different parts of the city."
"I would rather stand behind the counter and sell goods," said Roswell.
"Of course, you will be a salesman in time, if you stick to business faithfully. But it so happens that we didn't hire you as a salesman, but as a boy, whose chief business it should be to carry bundles. But we don't want to impose a disagreeable duty upon you. Therefore, if you think upon reflection that you would prefer not to continue in your situation, we will hire somebody else."
"That won't be necessary, sir," said Roswell, considerably crestfallen.
"You are content, then, to remain?"
"Yes, sir."
"And upon $4 a week?"
"Yes, sir. I suppose I may hope to have my wages increased some time?"
"When we find your services worth more, you shall receive more," said Mr. Turner. "That is fair, isn't it?"
"Yes, sir."
"Then here is your money. I didn't mean to talk so long, but it's as well to come to an understanding."
Roswell left the store considerably crestfallen. He found that, instead of regarding him worth an advance of wages, Mr. Turner had had it in his mind to discharge him, and that hurt his pride. It was certainly very singular that people shouldn't be more impressed with the fact that he was a gentleman's son. He could not have received less deference if he had been an ex-bootblack, like Dick himself. He certainly was no more contented than before, nor was his self-appreciation materially diminished. If the world did not recognize his claims, there was one comfort: his mother appreciated him, and he appreciated himself. As to his cousin, he did not feel quite so certain. "Why are you so late, Roswell?" asked his mother, looking up from her work as he entered. "It seems to me they kept you later than usual at the store, even for Saturday evening."
"I'm sick of the store," said Roswell impatiently.
"What's the matter?"
"I asked old Turner tonight if he wouldn't raise my wages," said Roswell.
"Well, what did he say?"
"He said he wouldn't do it."
"Did he give any reason?"
"He said I didn't earn any more. He's a stingy old hunks anyway, and I wish I was in another place."
"So do I. But it isn't so easy to get a new position. You had better stay in this till another offers."
"I hate carrying bundles through the streets. It isn't fit work for a gentleman's son."
"Ah, if your poor father had lived, things would have been very different with us all," said Mrs. Crawford with a sigh. She chose to forget that previous to his death her late husband's habits had been such that he contributed very little to the comfort or support of the family.
"I wouldn't care if I were a salesman," continued Roswell, "but I don't like being an errand boy. I'd just as lives go to the post office for letters, or to the bank with money. But as for carrying big bundles of calico under my arm, I don't like it. I was walking on Madison Avenue the other day with a 10-pound bundle, when the boot-black came up, dressed handsomely, with a gold watch and chain, and exulted over me for carrying such a big bundle.
There was a little exaggeration about this, for Dick was very far from exulting over Roswell. Otherwise he certainly would not have volunteered to carry the bundle himself. But it often happens that older persons than Roswell are not above a little misrepresentation now and then.
"He's an impudent fellow, then," said Mrs. Crawford indignantly. "Then Mr. Hall won't raise your wages?"
"It wasn't Mr. Hall I asked. It was Mr. Turner," said Roswell.
"Didn't he hold out any hope of raising your wages hereafter?"
"He said he would raise them when I deserve it. He don't amount to much. He's no gentleman," said Roswell scornfully.
"Who's no gentleman?" inquired James Gilbert, who chanced just then to enter the room.
"Mr. Turner."
"Who's Mr. Turner?"
"My employer. Hall and Turner, you know."
"What's amiss with him?"
"I asked him to raise my wages to-night, and he wouldn't." "Humph! How much did you ask for?" $2 more a week."
"You're a fool."
"What?"
said Roswell, astonished. "What?" exclaimed Mrs. Crawford angrily.
"I say the lad's a fool to ask for so large an advance so soon. Of course his employers refused it. I would in their place."
"You're very hard upon the poor boy," said Mrs. Crawford. "I thought you were his friend."
"So I am, but he's acted foolishly for all that. He should have known better." "I ought to be worth $6 if your boot-black is worth 10, responded Roswell. "He isn't worth 10. "Why do you pay him that, then?" "It's Mr. Rockwell who pays him, not I. Why he does it I can't say. It isn't because he earns it. No boy of his age, or yours either, can earn $10 a week. At any rate, he gets 10, and I get only 4. I certainly earn more than that," said Roswell. "I'm not so certain about that," said his cousin. "But if it will afford you any comfort, I'll venture to make the prediction that he won't remain in Rockwell and Cooper's employment a week longer." "Has anything happened?" asked Roswell, eagerly. "Not yet," said James Gilbert, significantly. "Then something is going to happen?" "You need not trouble yourself to ask questions. Wait patiently, and when anything happens, I'll let you know."
Here James Gilbert left the room, and went up to his own chamber. His words had excited hope in both Roswell and his mother. The former felt that it would be a satisfaction to him to learn that Dick had lost his situation, even if he failed to get it himself. End of chapter 10. Of Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fame and Fortune, or The Progress of Richard Hunter, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 11. A New Alliance. The name of Mickey Maguire is already familiar to the readers of Ragged Dick. He had acquired a prominent position among the downtown boot-blacks by his strength, which he used oftentimes to impose upon boys weaker than himself. He was a young ruffian indeed, with few redeeming qualities. When Dick was in the same business, he tried on 2 or 3 occasions to make him acknowledge his superiority, but it was not in Dick's nature to be subservient to any one whom he did not respect. Moreover, Dick had 2 good stout arms of his own, and knew how to use them in self-defense. The consequence was that Mickey Maguire signally failed in the attempts which he made, on different occasions,
to humble our hero, and was obliged to slink off in discomfiture with his satellite, Limpy Jim. The last glimpse we had of Mickey was in Dick's cast-off clothes, of which by some means, probably not honest, he had become possessed. He did not wear them long, however. The famous Washington coat and Napoleon pants were only mortal, and, being already of venerable antiquity, became at length too fragmentary even for Mickey's not very fastidious taste. One morning, accordingly, having levied an unwilling contribution from a weaker but more industrious bootblack, Mickey went to Baxter Street, and invested in a blue coat with brass buttons, which, by some strange chain of circumstances, had found its way thither from some country town, where it may at one time have figured at trainings and on town meeting days. A pair of overalls completed Mickey's costume. He dispensed with a vest, his money not having been sufficient to buy that also. Certainly Mickey presented a noticeable figure as he stood in the City Hall Park, clad in the above-mentioned garments. He was rather proud of the brass buttons, and may even have fancied, in his uncultivated taste, that his new costume became him. While he was swaggering about, he espied part of a cigar, which someone had thrown aside. Mickey, who was fond of smoking, picked it up and looked about him for a light, not being provided with a match. A young man was slowly crossing the park with a cigar in his mouth, but he was evidently plunged in thought, and hardly conscious of the scene about him. Mickey observed this, and a cunning scheme suggested itself. He walked up to the young man, and said cavalierly, "Give us a light, mister, will yer?" The young man mechanically took a cigar from his mouth, and passed it to the questioner, without observing who he was. Had he done so, it is doubtful whether the request would have been complied with. Rapidly calculating that he would not notice the substitution, Mickey, after lighting the stub, handed it to the young man, retaining the good cigar himself, and placing it straight away in his mouth. This trick would probably have passed off undetected, if it had not been observed by some of Mickey's fellow professionals. A jeering laugh from these called the young man's attention to the substitution, and with a look of indignation he said, "You young rascal, you shall pay for this." But Mickey evaded his grasp, and scudded rapidly through the park, pursued by the victim of misplaced confidence. "Run, Mickey! I'll bet you on!" cried Pat Nevins, encouragingly. "Go it, Longlegs!" said another, who backed the opposite party. "Give him a good licking when you catch him." "Maybe you'd have to wait too long for that," said Pat. "Leave your cigar with us, mister," said another boy. James Gilbert, for he was the young man in question, began to find that he was becoming rather ridiculous, and felt that he would rather let Mickey go free than furnish a spectacle to the crowd of bootblacks who were surveying the chase with eager interest. He accordingly stopped short, and throwing down the stub, prepared to leave the park. "Don't give it up, mister. You'll catch him," said his first backer. "Mickey can't run far. Ragged Dick gave him a stretcher once." "Ragged Dick?" said Gilbert, turning abruptly at the sound of this name. "Maybe you know him?" "Does he black boots?" "He used to, but he don't now." "What does he do?" "Oh, he's a swell now, and wears good clothes." "How is that?" "He's in a store, and gets good pay." "What's the name of that boy that ran away with my cigar?" "Mickey Maguire." "Was he a friend of Ragged Dick, as you call him?" "Not much. They had 2 or 3 fights." "Which beat?" "Dick. He can fight bully." Gilbert felt disappointed. He was in hopes our hero had met with a defeat. Somehow he seemed born for success. "Then I suppose Maguire hates him." "I'll bet he does." Thought Gilbert. "I might turn his enmity to some account. Let me consider a little." At length a plan suggested itself, and his countenance cleared up, and assumed an expression of satisfaction. On reaching home, he held the conversation with Roswell and his mother, which has been recorded at the close of the last chapter. Meantime, Mickey went home to a miserable lodging on Worth Street, in the precincts of the 5 Points, and very near where the 5 Points House of Industry now stands. This admirable institution has had a salutary influence, and contributed greatly to the improvement of the neighborhood. Then, however, it was about as vile and filthy as could be. Mickey exulted not a little at the success of his cunning, and smoked the cigar, an expensive one, by the way, with not a little satisfaction. He recounted the story to a group of admiring friends, who had not been fortunate enough to witness it.
"It's you that's got the cheek, Mickey," said Teddy Donovan. "You did it neat," said another. "Maybe I'll try that some day."
"You'd better not. The cop might get hold of you."
"Was it a good cigar, Mickey?"
"Wasn't it just! I wish I'd got another. Stand treat, Teddy."
"I would if I had the stamps. I'm saving up my money to go to the old Bowery tonight."
The boys were standing in a little group, and in the interest of their discussion did not observe the approach of James Gilbert, who was now visiting the park with a special object in view. With an expression of satisfaction he recognized the boy who had served him a trick the day before. Indeed, it was not easy to mistake Mickey. The blue coat with brass buttons and the faded overalls would have betrayed him, even if his superior height had not distinguished him from his comrades. Had Mickey been aware of Gilbert's approach, he would have thought it prudent to change his base, but his back being turned, he was taken by surprise. His attention was drawn by a tap on the shoulder, and looking round, he recognized his enemy as he regarded him. He started to turn, but was withheld by a strong grasp. "Leave me alone, will yer?" he said, ducking his head as if he expected a blow. "I believe you are fond of smoking," said Gilbert, continuing to hold him tight. Mickey maintained silence. "And sometimes exchange a poor cigar for a good one," continued his captor. "It was a mistake," said Mickey. "What did you run for, then?"
"What are you going to do about it, mister?"
asked one boy, curiously.
"So it was a mistake, was it?"
said Gilbert. "Yes, sir," said Mickey, glibly.
"Take care you don't make the mistake again, then. Now, you may black my boots."
Not only the boys who were standing by, but Mickey himself was considerably surprised at this unexpected turn. They confidently expected that Mickey would get a lickin', and instead of that he found himself a customer. Their respect for Gilbert was considerably diminished for failing to exact punishment, and their interest in the affair being over, they withdrew. Mickey laid down his box and commenced operations.
"How long have you been a boot-black?"
asked Gilbert. 5 years, going on 6, said Mickey.
"Can you earn much?"
"No," said Mickey. "Business ain't very good now."
"You manage to dress well,"
said Gilbert, with an amused look at Mickey's habiliments. "Yes," said Mickey, with a glance at the brass buttons. "But I had to borrow the money to buy my clothes."
"There used to be a boy around here that was called Dick. Did you know him?"
"There be a good many Dicks. Which do you mean?"
"This boy was nearly your size. I believe they called him Ragged Dick."
"I knowed him," said Mickey, shortly, with a scowl.
"Was he a friend of yours?"
"No, he wasn't. I gave him a lickin' once." The fact happened to be the other way, but Mickey was not very scrupulous as to the strict truth of his statements.
"You don't like him, then? Where is he now?"
"He's in a store, and swells round with good clothes."
"Have you seen him lately?"
"No, and I don't want to."
"He wears a gold watch now. I suppose he wouldn't have anything to say to you."
"Maybe not," said Mickey.
"It would be a good joke if he should lose his place and have to go back to boot-blacking again."
"I wish he would," said Mickey fervently. "It'd cure him of putting on airs."
"If, for example, his employer should be convinced that he was a thief, he would discharge him."
"Do you know him, mister?" asked Mickey, looking up suddenly.
"Yes."
"Is he a friend of yours?"
"I like him about as well as you do," said Gilbert.
"Done," said Mickey, releasing the second foot.
"Suppose you brush the other boot again. I'll pay you double. I want to talk to you a little."
"All right," said Mickey, and he resumed operations. The conversation that followed we do not propose to chronicle. The results will appear hereafter. Enough that Gilbert and Mickey departed mutually satisfied, the latter richer by 5 times his usual fee. End of chapter 11. Of Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fame and Fortune, or The Progress of Richard Hunter, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 12. Dick Falls into a Trap. One evening, when Dick and Fosdick returned from their respective stores, a surprise awaited them. "The postman left some letters for you," said the servant, as she opened the door to admit them. "Maybe they're from the tax collectors," said Dick. "That's the misfortune of bein' men of property. What was your tax last year, Fosdick?" "I don't remember such trifles," said Fosdick. "I don't think they was taxes," said the girl seriously. "They looked as if they was from a young lady." "Very likely they are from Fosdick's wife," said Dick. "She's rusticatin' in the country for the benefit of her health." "Maybe they're from yours, Mr. Hunter," said the girl, laughing. "No," said Dick gravely. "I'm a disconsolate widower, which accounts for my low spirits most of the time, and my poor appetite. Where are the letters?" "I left them on the bureau in your room," said the servant. "They come this afternoon at 3 o'clock." Both Fosdick and Dick felt not a little curious as to who could have written them letters, and hastened upstairs. Entering their chamber, they saw 2 very neat little notes, in perfumed French envelopes, and with the initial G in colors on the back. On opening them, they read the following in a neat, feminine, fine handwriting. As both were alike, it will be sufficient to give Dick's. "Miss Ida Grayson presents her compliments to Mr. Richard Hunter, and solicits the pleasure of his company on Thursday evening next, at a little birthday party, No. West 24th Street." "We're getting fashionable," said Dick. "I didn't used to attend many parties when we lived in Mott Street, and blacked boots for a livin'. I'm afraid I shan't know how to behave." "I shall feel a little bashful," said Fosdick, "but I suppose we've got to begin some time." "Of course," said Dick. "The important position we hold in society makes it necessary. How'll I be able to hold levees when I'm mayor, if I don't go into society now?" "Very true," said Fosdick. "I don't expect to occupy any such position, but we ought to go in acknowledgment of Mr. Grayson's kindness." Mr. Grayson was the teacher of the Sunday school class, of which both Dick and Fosdick were members. His recommendation had procured Fosdick his pleasant praise, and he had manifested his kindness in various ways. Those who have read Ragged Dick will remember that he had a very sprightly and engaging daughter of 10 years of age, who seemed to have taken an especial fancy to Dick. Being wealthy, his kindness had been of great service to both boys, inspiring them with self-respect, and encouraging them to persevere in their efforts to raise themselves to a higher position. The dinner bell rang just as the boys had finished their discussion, and they went down and took places at the table. Soon Miss Peyton came sailing in, shaking her ringlets coquettishly. She was proud of these ringlets, and was never tired of trying their fascinations upon gentlemen. But somehow they had not succeeded in winning a husband. "Good evening, Mr. Hunter," said she. "You look as if you had had good news." "Do I?" said Dick. "Perhaps you can tell what it is."
"I know how it came," said Miss Peyton, significantly. "Then I hope you won't keep me in suspense any longer than you can help." "Perhaps you'd rather I wouldn't mention before company?" "Never mind," said Dick. "Don't have any regard to my feelin's. They're tough, and can stand a good deal." "How do you like the letter G?" asked Miss Peyton, slyly. "Very much," said Dick, "as long as it behaves itself. What is your favorite letter?" "Don't think I'm going to tell you, Mr. Hunter. That was a pretty little note, and in a young lady's hand, too." "Yes," said Dick. "Perhaps you'd like to see it." "You wouldn't show it to me on any account, I know." "You may see it if you like," said Dick. "May I? Really? I should like to very much, but would the young lady like it?" "I don't think she'd mind. She's written one to my friend Fosdick just like it." Dick passed the invitation across the table. "It's very pretty indeed," said Miss Peyton. "And is Miss Ida Grayson very handsome?" "I'm no judge of beauty," said Dick. "So she lives in West 24th Street. Is her father rich?" "I don't know how rich," said Dick, "but my impression is that his taxes last year were more than mine." "I now know what your favorite letters are," said Miss Peyton. "They are I, G." "I, G are very well, as long as you don't put P before them," said Dick. "Thank you for another cup of tea, Mrs. Browning."
"I should think you'd need some tea after such a brilliant effort, Hunter," said Mr. Clifton, from across the table.
"Yes," said Dick. "I find my brain gets exhausted every now and then by my intellectual efforts. Ain't you troubled that way?"
"Can't say I am. Don't you want to go out and try a game of billiards this evening?"
"No, thank you. I've got to study."
"I expect to see you a college professor some of these days."
"I haven't made up my mind yet," said Dick. "I'm open to an offer, as the oyster remarked when he was placed on the table. If I can serve my fellow men best by being a college professor and getting a big salary, I'm willin' to sacrifice my private feelin's for the public good."
"Do you agree with your friend, Mr. Fosdick?" said Miss Peyton. "Won't you favor us with your views?"
"I have none worth mentioning," said Fosdick. "I leave my friend to do the talking, while I attend to the eating."
"Mr. Hunter's remarks are very entertaining," said Miss Peyton.
"Thank you," said Dick, "but my friend prefers a different kind of entertainment." The boys rose from the table and went up to their room to look over the evening's lessons. They were quite pleased with their new teacher, whom they found not only competent for his task, but interested in promoting their progress. He was able to help them readily out of their difficulties, and encouraged them to persevere. So they came to look forward to their evening lessons, not as tasks, but as pleasant exercises. "It's strange," said Dick, one evening after the teacher had left them. "I used to enjoy going to the Old Bowery so much. I went 2 or 3 times a week sometimes. Now I would a good deal rather stay home and study." "Then you didn't have a home, and the lighted theatre must have been much pleasanter than the cold and cheerless streets." "Yes, that was it. I used to get so tired sometimes of having no home to go to, and nobody to speak to that I cared about." "You'd hardly like to go back to the old life, Dick." "No, it would come pretty hard to me now. I didn't seem to mind it so much then." "Because you had never known anything better." "No. It was a lucky day when I met you, Fosdick. I'd never had the patience to learn. Readin' or tryin' to read always gave me the headache." "You always leave off the last letter in such words as reading, Dick. You should be more careful, now that you associate with educated persons." "I know it, Fosdick, but I'm so used to dropping the G that it comes natural. I will try to remember it. But about this party, shall we have to get new clothes?" "No. We each have a nice suit, and we shan't be expected to dress in the height of fashion."
I wish it were over. I dread it. So do I, a little. But I think we shall enjoy it. Ida is a nice girl. That's so. If I had a sister, I'd like her to be like Ida. Perhaps she'd like a brother like you. I notice she seems to fancy your company. I hope you're not jealous, Fosdick. You can be a brother to Miss Peyton, you know. Fosdick laughed. There's no chance for me there, either, he said. She evidently prefers you. I'll adopt her for my aunt, if it'll be gratifying to her feelings, said Dick. But I ain't partial to ringlets as a general thing. It is well, perhaps, that Miss Peyton did not hear these remarks, as she cherished the idea that both Fosdick and Dick were particularly pleased with her. A day or two afterwards, Dick was walking leisurely through Chatham Street, about 1:30. He was allowed an hour, about noon, to go out and get some lunch, and he was now on his way from the restaurant which he usually frequented. As it was yet early, he paused before a window to look at something which attracted his attention. While standing here, he became conscious of a commotion in his immediate neighborhood. Then he felt a hand thrust into the side pocket of his coat and instantly withdrawn. Looking up, he saw Mickey Maguire dodging round the corner. He put his hand into his pocket mechanically and drew out a pocketbook. Just then a stout, red-faced man came up puffing, and evidently in no little excitement.
"Seize that boy," he gasped, pointing to Dick. "He's got my pocketbook."
Contrary to the usual rule in such cases, a policeman did happen to be about, and following directions, stepped up and laid his hand on Dick's shoulder.
"You must come with me, my fine fellow," he said. "Hand over that pocketbook, if you please."
"What's all this about?" said Dick. "Here's the pocketbook, if it is yours. I'm sure I don't want it."
"You're a cool hand," said the guardian of the public peace. "If you don't want it, what made you steal it from this gentleman's pocket?"
"I didn't take it," said Dick, shortly.
"Is this the boy that stole your pocketbook?" demanded the policeman of the red-faced man, who had now recovered his breath. "It's the very young rascal. Does he pretend to deny it?" "Of course he does. They always do. When it was found on him, too. I never knew such bare-faced impudence."
"Stop a minute," said Dick, "while I explain. I was standing looking in that window, when I felt something thrust into my pocket. I took it out, and found it to be that pocketbook. Just then that gentleman came up, and charged me with the theft."
"That's a likely story," said the officer. "If anyone put that pocketbook into your pocket, it shows you were a confederate of his. You'll have to come with me."
And poor Dick, for the first time in his life, was marched to the station house, followed by his accuser and a gang of boys. Among these last, but managing to keep at a respectful distance, was Mickey Maguire. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. Of Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fame and Fortune, or The Progress of Richard Hunter, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 13. Dick in the Station House. Poor Dick! If Trinity Church spire had suddenly fallen to the ground, it could scarcely have surprised and startled him more than his own arrest for theft. During the hard apprenticeship which he had served as a street boy, he had not been without his share of faults and errors, but he had never, even under the severest pressure, taken what did not belong to him. Of religious and moral instruction he had then received none, but something told him that it was mean to steal, and he was true to this instinctive feeling. Yet, if he had been arrested a year before, it would have brought him less shame and humiliation than now. Now he was beginning to enjoy the feeling of respectability, which he had compassed by his own earnest efforts. He felt he was regarded with favor by those whose good opinion was worth having,
and his heart swelled within him as he thought that they might be led to believe him guilty. He had never felt so downhearted as when he walked in company with the policeman to the station house, to be locked up for examination the next morning.
"You wasn't sharp enough this time, young fellow," said the policeman.
"Do you think I stole the pocketbook?" asked Dick, looking up in the officer's face.
"Oh, no, of course not. You wouldn't do anything of that kind," said the policeman ironically.
"No, I wouldn't," said Dick emphatically. "I've been poor enough and hungry enough sometimes, but I never stole. It's mean."
"What's your name?" said the officer. "I think I have seen you before."
"I used to black boots. Then my name was Ragged Dick. I know you. Your name is Jones."
"Ragged Dick. Yes, I remember. You used to be pretty well out at the elbows, if I remember rightly."
"My clothes used to be pretty well ventilated," said Dick, smiling faintly. "That was what made me so healthy, I expect. But did you ever know me to steal?"
"No," said the officer. "I can't say I have."
"I lived about the streets for more than 8 years," said Dick, "and this is the first time I was ever arrested."
"What do you do now?"
"I'm in a store on Pearl Street."
"What wages do you get?"
$10 a week."
"Do you expect me to believe that story?"
"It's true."
"I don't believe there's a boy of your age in the city that gets such wages. You can't earn that amount."
"I jumped into the water and saved the life of Mr. Rockwell's little boy. That's why he pays me so much."
"Where did you get that watch and chain? Are they gold?"
"Yes. Mrs. Rockwell gave them to me."
"It seems to me you're in luck."
"I wasn't very lucky to fall in with you," said Dick. "Don't you see what a fool I should have been to pick pockets now, when I'm so well off?"
"That's true," said the officer,
who began to be shaken in his previous conviction of Dick's guilt. "If I'd been going into that business, I would have tried it when I was poor and ragged. I should not have waited till now."
"If you didn't take the pocketbook, then how came it in your pocket?"
"I was looking in at a shop window, when I felt it thrust into my pocket. I suppose it was the thief who did it, to get out of the scrape himself."
"That might be. At any rate, I've known of such cases. If so, you are unlucky, and I am sorry for you. I can't let you go, because appearances are against you. But if there is anything I can do to help you, I will."
"Thank you, Mr. Jones," said Dick gratefully. "I did not want you to think me guilty. Where is the man that lost the pocketbook?"
"Just behind us."
"I should like to speak to him a moment." The red-faced man, who was a little behind, came up, and Dick asked quietly, "What makes you think I took your pocketbook, sir?"
"Wasn't it found in your pocket, you young rascal?"
said the other irritably. "Yes," said Dick.
"And isn't that enough?"
"Not if somebody else put it there," said Dick.
"That's a likely story."
"It's a true story."
"Can you identify this as the boy who robbed you and whom you saw running?"
"No," said the red-faced man, rather unwillingly.
"My eyesight is not very good, but I've no doubt this is the young rascal." "Well, that must be decided. You must appear tomorrow morning to prefer your complaint."
"Mind you don't let the rascal escape," said the other.
"I shall carry him to the station house, where he will be safe."
"That's right. I'll make an example of him. He won't pick my pocket again in a hurry." "I hope the judge won't be so sure that I am guilty," said Dick. "If he is, it'll go hard with me."
"Why don't you call your employer to testify to your good character?"
"That's a good idea. Can I write a note to him and to another friend?"
"Yes, but perhaps the mail wouldn't carry them in time."
"I'll send a message. Can I do so?"
"When we get to the station house, I will see that you have a chance to send. Here we are."
Escorted by the officer, and followed by his accuser, Dick entered. There was a railing at the upper end of the room, and behind it a desk at which sat a captain of the squad. The officer made his report, which, though fair and impartial, still was sufficient to cause our hero's commitment for trial.
"What's your name?"
questioned the captain. Dick thought it best to be straightforward, and though he winced at the idea of his name appearing in the daily papers, answered in a manly tone, "Richard Hunter." "Of what nation?" "American." "Where were you born?" "In this city." "What is your age?" 16 years. These answers were recorded, and, as Dick expressed a desire to communicate with his friends before trial, permission was given him to write to them, and the trial was appointed for the next morning at the Tombs. The red-faced man certified that his wallet contained $9.62, which was found to be correct. He agreed to be present the next morning to prefer his charge, and with such manifest pleasure that he was not retained, as it sometimes happens, to ensure his appearance.
"I will find a messenger to carry your notes,"
said the friendly officer. "Thank you," said Dick. "I will take care that you are paid for your trouble."
"I require no pay, except what I have to pay the messenger."
Dick was escorted to a cell for safekeeping. He quickly dashed off a letter to Mr. Murdock, fearing that Mr. Rockwell might not be in the store. It was as follows: "Mr. Murdock, what will you think when I tell you that I have been unlucky enough to be arrested on suspicion of picking a man's pocket? The real thief slipped the wallet into my pocket as I was looking into a shop window, and it was found on me. I couldn't prove my innocence, so here I am at the station house. They will think strange at the store because I am absent. Will you tell Mr. Rockwell privately what has detained me? But don't tell Mr. Gilbert. He don't like me any too well, and would believe me guilty at once, or pretend he did. I am sure you won't believe I would do such a thing, or Mr. Rockwell either. Will you come and see me tonight? I am to be tried tomorrow morning. I ain't very proud of the hotel where I am stopping, but they didn't give me much choice in the matter. Richard Hunter, Station House, Franklin Street." The other letter was to Fosdick. Here it is: "Dear Fosdick, I didn't much think when I left you this morning that I should be writing to you from the station house before night. I'll tell you how it happened." Here follows a detailed account, which is omitted, as the reader is already acquainted with all the circumstances. "Of course they will wonder at the boarding house where I am. If Miss Peyton or Mr. Clifton inquires after me tonight, you can say that I am detained by business of importance. That's true enough. I wish it wasn't. As soon as dinner is over, I wish you'd come and see me. I don't know if you can, not being acquainted with the rules of this hotel. I shan't stop here again very soon if I can help it. There's a woman in the next cell who was arrested for fighting. She is swearing frightfully. It almost makes me sick to be in such a place. It's pretty hard to have this happen to me just when I was getting along so well. But I hope it'll come out right. Your true friend, Dick. P.S. I've given my watch and chain to the officer to keep for me. Gold watches ain't fashionable here, and I didn't want them to think me putting on airs. Station House, Franklin Street." After Dick had written these letters, he was left to himself. His reflections, as may readily be supposed, were not the most pleasant. What would they think at the boarding-house if they should find what kind of business it was that had detained him? Even if he was acquitted, some might suppose that he was really guilty. But there was a worse contingency. He might be unable to prove his innocence, and might be found guilty. In that case, he would be sent to the island. Dick shuddered at the thought. Just when he began to feel himself respectable, it was certainly bad to meet with such hard luck. What, too, would Mr. Grayson and Ida think? He had been so constant at the Sunday school that his absence would be sure to be noticed, and he knew that his former mode of life would make his guilt more readily believed in the present instance. If Ida should think me a pickpocket, thought poor Dick, and the thought made him miserable enough. The fact was that Ida, by her vivacity and lively manners, and her evident partiality for his society, had quite won upon Dick, who considered her by all odds the nicest girl he had ever seen. I don't mean to say that Dick was in love, at least not yet. Both he and Ida were too young for that. But he was certainly quite an admirer of the young lady. Again, if he were convicted, he would have to give up the party to which he had been invited, and he could never hope to get another invitation. All these reflections helped to increase Dick's unhappiness. I doubt if he had ever felt so unhappy in all his life. But it never once occurred to him that his arrest was brought about by the machinations of his enemies. He hadn't chanced to see Mickey Maguire, and had no suspicion that it was he who dropped the wallet into his pocket. Still less did he suspect that Gilbert's hostility had led him so far as to conspire with such a boy as Mickey against him. It was lucky that he did not know this, or he would have felt still more unhappy. But it is now time to turn to Mickey Maguire and Mr. Gilbert, whose joint scheme had met with so much success. End of chapter 13. Of Fame and Fortune. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to find out how you can volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Fame and Fortune, or The Progress of Richard Hunter, by Horatio Alger, Jr. Chapter 14. Mickey Maguire's Disappointment. Mickey Maguire waited until Dick was actually on the way to the station house, and then started for Pearl Street to acquaint Gilbert with the success of his machinations. His breast swelled with triumph at the advantage he had gained over his enemy.
"Maybe he'll keep his cheerin' reflections to himself another time," thought Mickey. "He won't have much to say about my goin' to the island when he's been there himself. They won't stand none of his airs there, I'm thinkin'."
There was another pleasant aspect to the affair. Mickey had not only triumphed over his enemy, but he was going to be paid for it. This was the stipulation between Gilbert and himself. The bookkeeper had not promised any definite sum, but Mickey, in speculating upon the proper compensation for his service, fixed upon $5 as about what he ought to receive. Like many others who count their chickens before they are hatched, he had already begun to consider what he would buy with it when he had got it. Now, only the day previous, Mickey had noticed hanging in a window in Chatham Street a silver watch and chain attached, which was labeled "Genuine Silver, only $5." Since Mickey had been the possessor of a blue coat with brass buttons, his thoughts had dwelt more than ever before on his personal appearance, and the watch had struck his fancy. He did not reflect much on the probable quality of a silver watch which could be sold for $5, and a chain thrown into the bargain. It was a watch, at any rate, and would make a show. Besides, Dick wore a watch, and Mickey felt that he did not wish to be outdone. As soon as he received his award, he meant to go and buy it. It was therefore in a very cheerful frame of mind that Mickey walked up in front of Rockwell and Cooper's store, and took his stand, occasionally glancing at the window. 10 minutes passed away, and still he remained unnoticed. He grew impatient, and determined to enter, making his business an excuse. Entering, he saw through the open door of the office the bookkeeper, bending over the desk writing. "Shine your boots?" he asked. Gilbert was about to answer angrily in the negative, when looking up he recognized his young confederate. His manner changed, and he said, "Yes, I believe I'll have a shine, but you must be quick about it." Mickey swung his box from his shoulder, and sinking upon his knees, seized his brush, and went to work scientifically. "Any news?" asked Gilbert, in a low voice. "Yes, mister, I've done it," said Mickey. "Have you managed to trap him?" "Yes, I left him on his way to the station house." "How did you manage it?" "I grabbed an old fellow's wallet and dropped it into Dick's pocket. He pulled it out, and while he was looking at it, up came the cop and nabbed him." "How about the man from whom the wallet was taken?" "He come up puffin', and swore Dick was the chap that stole it." "So he was carried off to the station house?" "Yes, he's there safe enough." "Then we shall have to carry on business without him," said Gilbert coolly.
I hope he will enjoy himself at his new quarters."
"Maybe they'll send him up to the island," said Mickey, beginning his professional operations upon the second boot.
"Very likely," said Gilbert. "I suppose you've been there before this."
"What if I have?" said Mickey, in a rather surly tone, for he did not relish the allusion.
"No offense," said Gilbert. "I only meant that if you have ever been there, you can judge whether your friend Dick will enjoy it." "Not a great deal," said Mickey. "But you needn't call him my friend. I hate him." "Your enemy, then. But get through as soon as possible."
Mickey struck his brush upon the floor to indicate that the job was finished, and rising, waited for his fee. Gilbert took from his pocket 10 cents and handed him.
"That's for the shine," he said. "And here's something for the other matter."
So saying, he placed in the hand of the bootblack a banknote. Mickey glanced at it, and his countenance changed ominously when he perceived the denomination. It was a $1 bill.
"It's $1," he said. "Isn't that enough?"
"No, it isn't," he answered sullenly. "I might have been nabbed myself. I can't afford to work on no such terms." Mickey was right. It was certainly a very small sum to receive for taking such a risk, apart from all moral considerations, and his dissatisfaction can hardly be wondered at. But Gilbert was not of a generous nature. In fact, he was disposed to be mean, and in the present instance he had even expected to get the credit of being generous. $1, he thought, must seem an immense sum to a ragged bootblack. But Mickey thought differently, and Gilbert felt irritated at his ingratitude.
"It's all you'll get," he said roughly.
"Then you'd better get somebody else to do your dirty work next time, mister," said Mickey angrily.
"Clear out, you young blackguard!"
exclaimed Gilbert, his temper by this time fully aroused.
"Clear out, if you don't want to be kicked out."
"Maybe you'll wish you'd given me more," said Mickey, sullenly picking up his box and leaving the office.
"What's the matter?"
asked Mr. Murdock, who happened to come up just as Mickey went into the street, and heard the last words of the altercation.
"Oh,"
said Gilbert carelessly,
"he wasn't satisfied with his pay. I gave him 10 cents, but the young rascal wanted more."
As he said this, he turned back to his desk.
"I wonder whether Gilbert's going anywhere," thought the head clerk. "I never knew him so extravagant before. He must be going out this evening."
Just then it occurred to him that Dick had been absent longer than usual, and as he needed his services, he asked,
"Has Richard returned, Mr. Gilbert?"
"I haven't seen him."
"Did he go out at the usual time?"
"Yes."
"What can have detained him?" said Mr. Murdock thoughtfully.
"He's probably fallen in with some of his old friends, and forgotten all about his duties."
"That is not his way," said Mr. Murdock quietly, as he walked away.
He understood very well Mr. Gilbert's hostility to Dick, and that the latter was not likely to receive a favorable judgment at his hands. 5 minutes later a boy entered the store, and looking about him a moment in uncertainty, said, I want to see Mr. Murdock."
"I am Mr. Murdock," he answered.
"Then this note is for you." The clerk felt instinctively that the note was from Dick, and not wishing Gilbert to hear the conversation, motioned the boy to follow him to the back part of the store. Then he opened and read the note quickly.
"Did Richard Hunter give this to you?" he asked.
"No," said Tim Ryan, for that was his name. "It was the cop that arrested him."
"I suppose a cop is a policeman."
"Yes, sir."
"Were you present when he was arrested?"
"Yes, sir."
"Do you know anything about it?"
"Yes, I seed it all."
"You saw the wallet taken?"
"Yes, sir."
"Did Richard take it?"
You mean Dick?" said Tim, interrogatively, for Richard was to him a strange name. "No, he didn't then. He wouldn't steal. I never knowed him to."
"Then you know Dick?"
"Yes, sir. I've known him ever since I was so high," indicating a point about 3 feet above the floor.
"Then who did take it, if not he?"
"Mickey Maguire.
"Who is he?"
He blacks boots."
"Then how did it happen that he was not arrested?"
"Mickey was smart enough to drop the wallet into Dick's pocket as he was standing before a shop winder. Then he got out of the way, and Dick was nabbed by the cop."
"Is this Mickey of whom you speak a friend of yours?"
"No. He likes to bully small boys."
"Then why didn't you tell the officer he had arrested the wrong boy?"
"I wanted to," said Tim, "for Dick's always been kind to me. But I was afraid Mickey would give me a beatin' when he got free. Then there was another reason."
"What was that?"
"It's mean to tell of a fellow."
"Isn't it meaner to let an innocent boy get punished, when you might save him by telling?"
"Maybe it is," said Tim, perplexed.
"My lad," continued Mr. Murdock, "you say Dick has been kind to you. You now have an opportunity to repay all he has ever done, by clearing him from this false charge, which you can easily do."
"I'll do it," said Tim, stoutly. "I don't care if Mickey does lick me for it."
"By the way," said Mr. Murdock, with a sudden thought, "what is the appearance of this Mickey Maguire?"
"He's rather stout, and has freckles."
"Does he wear a blue coat, with large brass buttons?"
"Yes," said Tim, in surprise. "Do you know him?"
"I have seen him this morning," said Mr. Murdock. "Wait a minute, and I will give you a line to Dick. Or rather, it will not be necessary. If you can get a chance, let him know that I am going to call on him this afternoon. Will you be at the station house, or near it, at 6 o'clock?
"Yes, sir."
Then we can arrange about your appearing as a witness at the trial. Here is a $50 for your trouble in bringing the note."
"I don't want it, sir," said Tim. "I don't want to take anything for doing a good turn to Dick."
"But you have been prevented from earning money. You had better take it."
But Tim, who was a warm-hearted Irish boy, steadfastly refused, and left the store in quest of Henderson's hat and cap store, having also a note to deliver to Fosdick.
"So that was Mickey Maguire who was here a little while since," said Mr. Murdock to himself. "It seems singular that immediately after getting Richard into trouble he should have come here where he was employed. Can it be that Gilbert had a previous acquaintance with him?"
The more Mr. Murdock reflected, the more perplexed he became. It did cross his mind that the two might be in league against Dick. But then, on the other hand, they evidently parted on bad terms, and this seemed to make such a combination improbable. So he gave up puzzling himself about it, reflecting that time would clear up what seemed mysterious about the affair. Gilbert, on his part, could not help wondering on what errand Tim Ryan came to Mr. Murdock. He suspected he might be a messenger from Dick, but thought it best not to inquire, and Mr. Murdock did not volunteer any information. When the store closed, the head clerk bent his steps toward the station house. End of chapter 14.